to speak first to introduce the principal gardener and creative drive behind it, our little project. That's Bronwyn, and just a little brief to put us in context with what the Rahman Centre does. So we've got a very small but very highly productive market garden in Braidwood. So that includes chickens, a couple of sheep, a couple of pigs in rotation because we can't fit all those things at once. And we are in suburbia, so we have to be mindful of our neighbours. We're sort of an acre block in a suburban setting, and we bought another quarter acre. But our productive land is about 1,000 square metres under cultivation. We feed the soil, that's one of the key things. We manage its fertility with amendments, including microbes, with our own composts, with minerals, fertiliser and manure mixes, and we are going to share our intensive amendment part 1 with you tonight. This is the one that we rely on the most. Because if you take a lot out of the soil, you cultivate intensively, you've got to put it all back and more some. We grow garlic, which is a very sustainable crop. It has a tiny footprint, really. It's environmentally friendly. It has a low impact on the earth. It can be grown organically. It's not thirsty and it's pretty hard wearing. It's easily grown on a small commercial scale, so we're involved in that as well, which Bron will talk about. So I'll introduce Principal Gardener, Bronwyn Richards.
Hi everyone. Okay. So, as Helen said, our garden is quite small. So our entire block comes up to an acre and a half. So we're not even a hectare. We are located in the village of Braidwood, so we have a large suburban block in the village of Braidwood, which is how villages all were designed. They were designed so that you could produce some food for yourself in your own backyard. And essentially that's what we're doing, except that we're producing food for more than just ourselves. We're producing a lot of food for our village as well. So the block, we moved there in 2002, and it's a 1970s, what I call brick venereal. You know, it's nothing fabulous. It's just a suburban house, and but it's comfortable, which is always good, and it has a very large block. It has some well-established ornamental trees in the front garden and the back garden, and then beyond the back garden we have baskets of vegetables. So I've always grown a bit of food for, you know, you just go, oh yes, we'll have a little veggie garden. I've raised a family. I raised my family in the northern suburbs of Wollongong. We actually had a couple of acres there, and I had dairy goats and grew food there as well. So it's not something new for me. I've been doing it for a long time. I am a teenager of Grassroots and Earth Garden, and discovered those magazines when I was about 14 or 15 and went, oh my God, that's how life's meant to be. Oh, I've got to do this. So at 50, I probably finally did it in a way that I believe is really productive. We've always dabbled as part of our life, but to do it seriously came much later. So I've always wanted to produce food. I've always wanted to produce food and for it to be consumed locally. For me, that seems to be the truest way of ensuring that you're getting good, clean, healthy food. So in 2006, Wynlen House was born, and I gave up one of my jobs, as you do in life. I sort of went, what am I doing this for? Can't quite remember anymore. And Helen at that time was still working, so she was the farmer's wife supporting the farmer, as is often the case. And we started, I had a vegetable garden, but at that point I wanted to grow for other people. And making that step to grow for other people is, in fact, actually quite a significant step. I was a little bit surprised at how significant I felt that was to be. So growing for yourself, growing for your friends, that's all fun, but suddenly you've got people who actually expect food from you regularly. We started out as a CSA, a community-supported agricultural project. There are lots of different forms of CSA, but primarily the main overarching philosophy about CSA is that somebody is committed to supporting your agricultural endeavour. So we had essentially 6 families who said that they would buy food off us every week and that they would buy what we produced. And that's how Wynlen House was born and how it was started. So we did that till 2010. In 2010, I sort of stopped and sat back and went, well, I'm working really hard and I don't think I'm ever going to make a profit out of this endeavour if I keep going in this way. I need to rethink how I'm doing things and I need to do things better and smarter. So I spent 6 months doing a lot of research and extending my knowledge about things, and that resulted in investment in a hothouse that we got designed locally to be on skids so that we could move it. I spent a lot of time exploring agricultural fabrics, frost fabrics, and what was available in Australia. Not a damn lot at that time. There's a little bit more now. And as Helen has said, we live in an extremely cold climate. So the capital region around Canberra encompasses the alpine region of the Snowy Mountains and the Snowy Mountains of northeast Victoria and around the Canberra zone. We are one of the coldest regions in mainland Australia. We're even colder than most parts of Tasmania. We average 109-10 frosts per year. In a region like yours, I know you have some snow in parts of this region, but you probably average at the most 50 frost days a year. Most cold climate regions average between 20 and 25, up to really cold, 50 frost nights a year. We're well above that. We, on average, have 3 months of frost. 3 months. Our frost season starts on the 22nd of March and finishes on the 22nd of November. We are not a climate that makes it easy, if that makes sense. So having frost protection that works is really important, and having a system to actually support your frost protection is another really equally important aspect. And so we were talking to Zach before, and he was saying that he's been using some cover stuff and that he's using polypipe for that cover. And we started off with that system using polypipe. So you have a couple of Rio bars in the ground, you do a bit of polypipe over the top, you can buy some clips or you can wire it down. So we were using that system, and the only option for frost protection that we had at that time was plastic, nothing else. There was no other sort of material around. And so we started off using plastic. This is in 2002 when I moved there, through to 2006, right up to 2010. The problem with plastic is it doesn't breathe. It doesn't allow any natural moisture through, and I didn't like the impact it was having on the soil and the plants underneath it. We also live in an extremely dry climate, so we have an average of 650 mils of rain a year. So we cannot afford not to have any of that moisture going through to the soil. This year we are in crisis in terms of water. We've had up to, I think we might have got 5 or 10 mils out of the rain that just hit across the state. But we've had 105 mils in 8 months this year. So we are way below our annual average rainfall, It's extremely dry. Yes, so just a night, There's always little problems where you live and where you grow, and so that's just another one. So plastic to me was not a nice environment to be growing under, and it certainly wasn't assisting the soil to maintain its viability. So I found a New Zealand company called Redpath, who also had operations in Australia, and they produced a spun propylene product. So it's actually quite porous, and people are shaking their heads. So some of you have actually seen that product. It's quite porous. It allows air circulation and moisture to go through, and it provides about 2 to 3 degrees moderation of the temperature impact. So it does. The idea of frost protection is that it doesn't stop things getting frosted, but it does ameliorate the severe impact. So in our frost climate, cauliflower heads burn terribly, broccoli burns terribly. This year we averaged -6 for 3 months, basically. And so we lost a lot of... I couldn't get normally we can have radicchios and some cold climate European lettuces growing quite well. The radicchios just would not grow. They actually burnt in the ground. And what other thing? And broad beans have been terrible this year. What's happened to the broad beans? Yeah, so, like every year there's always something that's a little bit different and something that doesn't work, but that's just the nature of growing food. So we started using the spun polypropylene. I got our local rural store to order it in. I said, we're running workshops. I'm telling people to buy this stuff. You should have it here because they'll want to buy it. And they're still the only rural store in the Canberra region that actually stocks it. Redpath also have a particular cloche frame clip that works really well. So I'm just wondering if you can find... and so it's designed for the horticultural industry. It comes in different sizes and different widths, different heights, but it's a galvanised metal. It's a bar that goes across like that. It has a hook in it. Yes. All right. So this is galvanised here. It's got a ridge in it, so it goes. It has goes in and out, and across the ridge you have a piece of shaped wire that clips in one side here and clips over onto the other side, and so it's very, very tight. We also have lots of wind. Who doesn't have wind in their lives in some part of the year anywhere in Australia? So what I was finding with the other system we were using was that every morning when it was windy season, I'd have to go and collect every piece of cover and put it all back on the garden. I'm thinking, there must be a better way. You can't just spend all your life doing these things. So these go straight into the ground, and you can lift up the fabric under the clip, so you don't actually have to dismantle anything to access what's in there. We use it for both sun protection and frost protection, so we use it for shade cloth in summer as well, and it is incredibly effective. This photo was taken this year in the middle of winter, and we had to double cloth just about everything this year because it was so cold, and we normally don't have to do that. So you can see that it's quite thick, the covering. Anyway, so I got distracted onto frost protection and stuff. But anyway, so that was one major piece of research that in fact streamlined a lot of our activity, actually having a material that was effective and a way of keeping it on without it blowing away, and so that you could lift it up and down and just work through, you can water through it, you can fertilise through it, made a huge difference in time and energy in the garden. And then the other exploration that I did was to start to explore intensive polyculture. And I know that the Ramin Centre here has a philosophical viewpoint about agroecology, in that it's about small farms growing a large variety that is going to feed us all and sustain us all. Traditional multi-cropping systems provide as much as 20% of the world food supply. Polycultures constitute at least 80% of the cultivated area of West Africa, while much of the production of staple crops in the Latin American tropics also occurs in polycultures. These diversified farming systems, in which the small-scale farmer produces grain, fruits, vegetable fodder and animal products in the same field or garden, outproduce the yield per unit of single crops such as corn grown alone on a large-scale farm. By managing fewer resources more intensively, small farmers are able to make more profit per unit of output and thus make more total profits, even if production of each commodity is less overall. So what there's been some research done in the United States. So in the United States, the smallest 2 hectare farms produced $15,104 per hectare and netted about $2,900 per hectare. The largest farms, averaging 15,000 hectares, yielded $249 per hectare and netted about $52 per hectare. So what that is clearly showing you is that you can actually get greater value of your land space from small, intense polyculture production. Not only do small to medium-sized farms exhibit higher yields than conventional larger-scale farms, but they do this with much lower negative impacts on the environment, as research shows that small farmers take better care of natural resources, including reducing soil erosion and conserving biodiversity. And I think that's really important to remember as well. The smaller area that you're managing, the more you actually focus on that area and manage it well. The larger the area, the less ability you have to do that. So as Helen said, we use, in a small way, an intensive polyculture system, not only for the whole farm, but also in our market garden practice. So Helen mentioned that we raise table poultry, sheep and pigs. So on our small 1.5 acres, we raise 2 batches of table poultry meat chickens a year. A batch for us is 30. We get them in as day olds and we raise them on the farm and then we on-sell. We do a batch of turkeys for Christmas, so we have turkeys at the moment. I think you'll see some photos of some of our turkeys. So a batch of turkeys is 30 as well. So we raise those for Christmas. And biannually, we do a mix of pigs and sheep. So wherever we are, the sheep, we usually get sheep after they're weaned at about 4 months. We get 3 at a time. We kill 1 at 12 months as lamb, and we keep the turkeys, and we keep 2 and grow them out to hog it because that's what we prefer. And we usually, so that means we have sheep for a period of 2 years. When we have finished with sheep, we then get a couple of pigs. Pigs are high producers, and you keep them for a much shorter period of time. So we usually have pigs for about 6 months. So in our 1,000 square metre market garden, which is not 1,000 square metre in one big section, we have lots of different little sections and lots of different things going on. We produce about 2.5 tonnes of food produce per year. And that's what we sell. That's what we're producing to sell. So we know that because we weigh a year weighing it. So we know that Helen's going, do we have to weigh it? And she'd put it all nicely in a basket for display, and I said, did you weigh that? Oh. So that doesn't include any of the meat we produce on our farm. It doesn't include eggs. It doesn't include the food we consume, and it doesn't include the food that we actually do slow food lunches with and pop-up cafes with and all the other things that we do. So this is purely what we produce to sell, and that's quite significant out of a quarter of an acre of land. We do that by feeding the soil, of course, but also through a very particular sort of planting system. There are different ways that you can use this intensive polyculture planting system, but this is how we do it, and I quite like it. So, where are my dates? Where are my dates? I had a little piece of paper with dates on it, so I knew which dates we were talking about. Thank you. Okay. So in terms of how our garden's constructed, we have plots, and the plots might be 10 metres by 11 metres, and each plot is divided up into a garden bed. Each bed is usually about 750, 800 centimetres wide, sometimes up to a metre wide. So this is a bed, and it's 800 centimetres wide. And in the bed, we have a number of different rows within each bed. So in this bed, on the outside row, we have planted cabbages. No, they're broccoli. Generally speaking, when you read the instructions about planting out broccoli or whatever you do, it'll say that broccoli needs to be planted, it's a growth feeder, needs to be planted 50 centimetres apart and at least 1 metre or 1.5 metres between rows. So if you think about that in terms of what they're saying, that means 1 broccoli, 2 broccoli, 3 broccoli, 4 broccoli, 5 broccoli, your next bed's over here, and you've wasted all of that space. Well, we say that's all wasted space, and you need to be filling that up with different food because it will grow. It's a very sort of... Yeah, anyway, so it's a system that looks at, that mixes heavy feeders with light feeders, heavy feeders with other heavy feeders, slow growers with fast growers, root crops with non-root crops, tall crops with broad crops. So it's sort of this whole continuous different type of thinking about things. So where's the next page? Here we go. It relies on interplanting, which is what we're doing here. So we have our large brassicas. You can see that all of these things have been planted out at seedlings. One of the things about this type of planting is that you need to have them all going in at the same time, and so planting out seedlings is a much better way to go than planting out seeds. You get reliability and you know how long your crop's going to take. You've got a fair idea how long it's going to take to mature, so when you're going to be harvesting. So this is a broccoli. Next, in between, this is 50 centimetres here between these two broccoli plants. In between here we've got lettuces. They're not heading lettuces, they're like mignonettes and those sorts of things, frilly lettuces. They grow really quickly. From a seedling, they'll be ready to harvest in winter in 8 weeks, in summer 4 to 6. So they're growing quite quickly. So we plant those in between your brassicas. So that's one row. You've already got 2 crops in that one row. Down the middle of the bed, we've planted leeks. Leeks are tall, they take up no space. Fennel is another one that we often use in the middle of the crop. It's tall, it actually doesn't take up much physical space. So we put leeks down, they're planted about 10 centimetres apart, And then on the other side of the bed, we basically do a repeat of what's happening here. So, yeah, you can see we do the diagonal planting with the brassicas. And so we might use lettuces, or we could use pak choi or any sort of Asian green, because they grow really quickly. They just grow, they fill up space. You've harvested them quite quickly. We do some seed raising, but we do purchase a lot in. We're planting out between 1,000 and 1,500 seedlings every 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a lot of seedlings to be producing. And we see that that's an enterprise in its own right. We're a 2-person small farm, and so we just don't have the time to do that, because it does take a lot of time or the space to raise that amount of seedlings so that they're all ready to go out in sequential plantings like this. We have some views about the labelling of using organic or not organic. We believe that the most important thing is to know your farmer and where your food comes from, and not the label they happen to be using. Yeah, most of these aren't genetically modified. We don't have a lot of genetically modified. They're genetically modified in the terms that we have been, as humans, genetically modifying animals and plants for our entire existence, but not manipulated at the gene level, if that makes sense. So we also plant seeds. So we've got one row here. This is our second row, and that'll be something fast like radishes or Asian turnips or something like that. We usually do one row radishes, one row Asian turnips. The radishes are harvested in 4 to 6 weeks. The Asian turnips are harvested in 6 to 8 weeks. So if you just move on to the next slide. So that the date of that planting, what did I do with that piece of paper? Okay. So, sorry, just go back to the first one. Yeah, that one. So this bed was planted out on the 20th of October. So it's a recent planting, all right? Next one is 2. There's 2. It should be in number. All right. Okay. Keep going, keep going. 1. Technological failures. 2. Okay, so, okay, all right. So, oops, okay. So this was planted on the 8th of October, about 2 weeks before that previous bed. You can see how things have grown. It's not leeks. This is spring onions down the middle here. And you can see that the seeds have started to come up. Okay? So this has got lettuces, and it's broccoli and lettuces, basically, what you're looking at there. So the next one, picture 3, which we've got to turn around. Okay, and we make it a little bit larger. Okay, so this one was planted on the 15th of September. So just ignore that side for a minute. See how big the lettuces are? We'll go home and start harvesting those. The cabbages are growing. You can see that they're growing. We've already, that didn't germinate very well. We'll talk about why later. This is radishes on this side. They're ready to harvest. Now on this side, we have brassicas and pak choi. This time of year, guess what? The pak choi just goes to seed. Is that what's happened to everybody? Pak choi. So you can see that there are still leaves, but it's flowering. We don't see that that's a waste for a number of reasons. We can still use the leaves and eat those leaves. We actually make a salad, stir-fry mix for our stall, so often it's the leaves like that go into it. Our animals, all our poultry, love that, so that's not a waste as far as I'm concerned. And you can see that the leeks here, because it's leeks again in the middle, are starting to get bigger. So the next bed. that we have to turn around and make bigger. So this bed was planted on the 10th of August, so we're going 4 weeks before the last bed we looked at. These lettuces we've started picking. They're all hearted and ready to pick. You can see how large the cabbages are. Instead of putting leeks in the middle, we put a couple of rows of beetroots. So they're ready. They're about this big, so we'll start harvesting those as baby beets. And on this side, it's again cabbages and pak choy, and you can see that it's starting to go to seed, but we're starting to harvest the pak choy. And then the last photo. Oh, that came around the right way. Okay, so this one was planted on the 20th of June. That's actually garlic down the middle, by the way. We've harvested all the lettuces. We had lettuces and pak choy in this mixed bed. We harvested all the leeks and everything else. And as you can see, the cabbages are now occupying a fair whack of the bed. So they'll be ready in another few weeks. They're quite slow at this time of year, but they grow so that they're actually occupying all the space of the bed. And the idea is that at each stage you're giving the plant that needs the space it requires. And so these are the last to come out of the bed. So effectively it means we get 6 crops out of one space of bed, and that's and we get that crop over a period of time. So it's not that we get everything all at once. We get it over a stage period of time, and it's this type of polyculture that can be done in different ways that gives you a large amount of food and lots of it, lots of variety of it.
We don't have a lot of any one thing. What we grow is a variety of things. So the object is that someone comes to the stall, there's sometimes up to 30 different vegetables on the stall. So you can look, you can shop, you can buy enough variety to keep you going for a week. You don't have to eat turnips for a week or potatoes for a week. There's enough variety there in leafy greens and root crops, depending on the season, that you can shop and not be bored during the week, just having to eat 1 or 2 things.
In terms of resting a bed and or using green manure, often we end up with a bed that is quite weedy. Essentially, weeds are a green manure. You can grow green manures for specific benefits to the soil, but it's about putting organic matter into the soil. So weeds are organic matter. They're growing there. We use our slasher / mower. Our mower is our way of slashing our green manure crop, so to speak. So we run the mower over it on quite high. We use microbes to help break that down very quickly, and we turn that back into the soil. So, which is exactly the principles you do with a green manure crop. So we do that with weeds and see it as a green manure crop. What else? Oh, so the other thing about intensive planting is that you're using companions. So you need to have a little bit of understanding about what grows well with each other. And I can tell you that peas hate any onion family. Beans hate any onion family. There are some things, most things are harmonious, reasonably harmonious, but then when it says that it's an antagonist, they are not wrong. They are not joking when they say they don't like each other. So you use some understanding of companions. You use thinking about how the space the plant's going to occupy when you're thinking about how to plan out a bed. You think about things that plant quickly, things that plant slowly. You think about synergies, what's going to create an overall beneficial sort of greater than the sum of the parts sort of impact. This works well for us. That sort of intensive bed program we use never fails us, always works well. We always get good crop production.